This is our second installation of the OEM COG, and we're trying to follow the initiatives listed on the slide that to make ICEAA more valuable, more relevant to you guys. So what we're going to do today is start off with an overview from Dr. Hoffman about affordability, and then follow up with brief discussions from Northrop Grumman, Huntington Ingalls, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin. And then we will end with, during the time, we'll have a few poll questions we ask you to get involved with to let us know where you're coming from. And finally, I'll end with a little discussion on kind of what the next steps are. So if there's nothing else, then I'll turn it over and introduce Dr. Hoffman. Darren, take it away.
I'm Darren Hoffman. I am an engineer at Raytheon. So I live as a cost engineer. I work my time as part system engineer, part business development and manager. So you can imagine I spend a lot of time on the front end of business. So I was asked by Bob to talk about affordability. So next slide. So I said affordability, but my first question is, how much does this cost? I apologize to my Lockheed Martin brothers that are probably on this call. I actually don't mean this as I'm being to pick on you. Honestly, I picked your picture of your airplane or your fighter jet because all of us know what it is. And honestly, given all of our release documents, it's easy to get a permission from the U.S. Navy to show a picture for a presentation. So how much does this cost? That's an interesting question that we always get asked as cost engineers. They ask us what things cost. So is this aircraft $100 million? Is it $20,000 per flight hour? These get to be some very interesting questions as a cost engineer when we get asked, what does it cost? So I'm going to switch slides. So my first question to everyone in the room, and you guys can all ask, is does cost equal affordability? So when we talk about affordability, my job in my life is I always think about it not from my job as Raytheon employee or any other job I've ever done in my life. I put myself in the shoes of the gentleman standing there. In this case, he's looking for a tasty beverage. So he's saying, what is his point of view? What can he afford? So in a affordability context, that is, buy it when I need it, i.e., do I have the money in my pocket? Can I get it today? Use it for the needs I want. So will that beverage, will it satisfy my thirst or whatever I decide I need it for? Can I use it whenever I want during its expected lifespan, i.e., a drink does have an expiration date. Will I be able to use it in the time before that expiration date occurs, or will it have sat on the shelf in my house so long that it's expired? And then, can I get it within the budget I can afford? If I have a wallet and I got $5 in my pocket and that drink costs $5.50, it's actually going to be unaffordable for me. So it's beyond my cost. So the simple answer is cost and affordability are not the same thing. But I'm sure lots of people on this phone call that are cost engineers like me go through that all the time with our leadership, with our customers, with everyone we talk to, that cost and affordability are not the same. So what is affordability to our main customer? For most of us here on this phone call, that is Raytheon, Northrop, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and lots of other defense contractors, the DoD is our customer. So most of us are probably used to this affordability as a definition where it's a degree of which the life cycle cost of acquisition is within the range of the DoD force structure and the life cycle. So when we talk the life cycle, that is the development phase, that is the production phase, which is when we're buying the product, that is the sustainment phase, and something that we often don't talk too much about because a lot of our programs can last decades is the disposal cost. So for some of our long-term programs, such as those that were involved with space exploration and dealt with nuclear reactors, the disposal phase has actually become quite a challenge in the long run. So understanding affordability is really important. And we always need to know when somebody cares about affordability, where in that cycle do they care? So I always like this picture. It's kind of it's one of my favorites. And it kind of brings home to me what affordability is in a program aspect of what we do on a day, what a cost engineer does in an affordability aspect of a program. And that is, I call it's a balancing act. It's balancing the development cost, the production cost, the disposal cost, the operation cost, the sustainment cost. And it's actually not only looking at your individual item that you are dealing with. So in this case, I have two pictures of a tank and I have a transport vehicle. Very important things, they do different functions. But I don't care just about my my vehicle. In this case, I actually could be really concerned about the fuel cost. I mean, we all drive, actually, given COVID, we don't drive too much anymore. But during our old aspects of our lives, we would drive quite a bit. So having a fuel-efficient car probably was really important to us when we were being the daily commuter. So in a program affordability, that is setting technical performance measures that we can track, and some of those happen to be affordability. So is our cost within the matrix of what the budget is given to us, what our long-term cost projects are for the production? These become important aspects because we want to balance the requirements of the technical schedule with the cost at each phase. So when I say cost at each phase, that's affordability. So in Raytheon, I'm going to kind of give you how this works in a very simple aspect in comparison to like a government, to the customer's mandate. So affordability targets are treated as key performance metrics. This usually happens throughout the program, that they will have not to exceed, they will have cost shares on development, or in some cases, they have fixed price contracts on production or total allowable spend that they could do during each phase. Those are targets that are set by the customer. In Raytheon, or in probably most of our companies, I would imagine, those metrics are then set as technical performance measures. They are then reviewed throughout our gating process, and they are monitored so that we can actually sit there and at each phase and say, oh, we set a target of X, and we are 5% below that X. Is that good for us? Does that help us adjust our affordability for longer term? And if it doesn't, how can we get teams together, how can we fix that? So in the bottom right, you can think about this for like a fixed wing. We'll go back to that F-35. In this case, this is not the percentages for the F-35. This is just generic from a DoD overall study of most aircraft for the last 50 years, that the development program for the lifespan is about 9%. Given a normal size fleet, it's about 30% to procure all those aircraft. And then to do the operations and support, it's 60%. So if you think about it, sometimes you have to think years ahead to how you're going to operate and sustain that aircraft, because that's actually where the long life costs are going to live. So I like this slide. I often use this one too, is traditional affordability. So how do we do that in the old aspects where, you know, cost is dependent upon everything else we do, i.e. affordability is dependent on our solution. So what do? We take the product requirements, we don't come up with a design, we cost out that design, we go to suppliers and we get how much that material costs, we build it. Then we sit there and say, okay, we've now figured out the development, we figured out the production cost. Is that cost too high for what we actually want to be at? Yes, it is. Okay, let's go back to the beginning and turn the crank again. This is because we're not treating cost as part of our trade. We are saying the design is the dictating controller. Whatever we design, whatever it costs is what we're going to live with. Whatever it takes to sustain that is what we're going to live with. Unfortunately, when you think about it for affordability, this often becomes very difficult because the only initiatives you have to improve your affordability is doing what we call cost reduction initiatives. That could be, oh, I'm going to go back and redesign a part because its mean time between failures is too high. So therefore, if it's too high, I'm going to redesign it for something better. But as you can imagine, now you're designing something twice. And then you have to retest it twice. Then you have to introduce it twice, if not more. That becomes very difficult, and the entire life cycle costs constantly go up. So in my world, and what I've tried to push very hard for at Raytheon, is this idea of, from the DoD and from DARPA, of exploring costs earlier, which is, the basic idea is, in the slide I previously showed, we're kind of at that bottom, we're in that bottom set of blocks that we do: concept, design, buy, build. Think about affordability. If affordability is no good, we go back and redesign it. As you can imagine, the only thing you can do is you go back to the beginning, and you've already spent a good amount of money. Very unproductive, or very expensive for our customer, because that's, again, the most important thing. What is this important for our customer? So from DARPA's point of view, they had this idea of come up with a concept, come up with the use cases. Now think about the affordability, which is think about the total life cycle cost. Think about which phase is most important. Is the development important? Is the purchasing of the item important? Is the being able to use it when I need it? Is it the repairability important? Once they get there, you can then start thinking about, okay, I have a good design. I have a concept of what is affordable. Is it a waterfall growth? Is it multiple sprints where I keep on improving year over year on my solution? And I can say, how do I now buy that? Where do I buy that? And then how do I design it? By doing that way, we attack affordability early. So therefore, the life cycle, as that chart shows, the life cycle cost determination is at a very young phase. Because if you did it in the current model, as you can see, if you just drew a line straight up from where that red dotted circle is on the right, you go straight up. If you made a decision on affordability towards the middle of production, 90%, if not more, of your life cycle cost determination has been done for you. So the only thing you can do is cost reduction initiative, and that becomes a hard trade. But if I do it in the beginning, my life cycle costs are not determined. Affordability and the cost at each phase is now a independent variable, and therefore I get to treat it as my trade, just like I would treat my swap, my performance metrics, my technical measures. So how do you do affordability modeling? You know, pretty straightforward. You take estimates, you come up with a model, you get actuals, you update it, and you keep on updating the model in big circles. What improves your accuracy? All of us know this type of information. It's actuals, knowing how many hours we have. It is, you know, what is our adjustments, doing Six Sigma worksheets. It's how do we improve yield, and understanding what variables have adjustments. Pretty straightforward. So that type of modeling is very easy when you have lots of knowns. But as I say, if you pull this data forward and you do affordability modeling in the beginning of a program, you kind of have lots of uncertainty. It's lots of guess. I hate using the word. It's not really guessing, but it's lots of what can I do? What do I think is possible? So you can use historical data, and not every program is the same. But what happens is if you do a point solution, you have a very large error bar in the beginning. And as we expect, we go further into the production of a program, that uncertainty is much more locked in. So our goal, as you can imagine, would be starting in where that number 1 is how do we shrink our unknowns, or how do we accept the uncertainty? So pretty straightforward. How I end up doing this is, when I first came to Raytheon, most of our analysis for affordability were point solutions, which was, oh, I know how much each of my 3, we'll make it up, 3 of my boxes each cost X, Y, and Z. I know the number of hours. I'm going to do some simple math, and I'm going to get an output. That's straightforward. So I know my inputs are known, and the outputs are simply a combination. What I started doing when I came to Raytheon is, I hate using, not being the geek here, the Stoichiotastic Approach, which most of us already know this is. It's basically my inputs have probability distributions, i.e., if I've taken historicals rather than using a single historical data point, I may say that like box 1 on the left is actually similar, is in the family of these other 13 products. So as an example, if product 1 is a data processor, I may be able to turn around and say, well, I've built 15 data processors in the past, and here are its complexities. And its variation of cost can be from $5, we'll make it up, 5 hours to 100 hours. So in this bid, I'm going to have a variation between 5 hours and 100 hours, and I can understand what causes that distribution. I put that into my model now, and what ends up happening, what ends up coming out is a distribution space. So it's not saying anymore, well, A becomes B automatically. What happens is it says A plus B plus C with all of its variation will give me the likelihood of an output with its own distribution. So I could sit there and I can make, with our leadership, a determination on what level of risk we'd want. So as you can imagine, if that distribution is very narrow, the risk is very small. I can know where my variation is. But if it's something very novel, I may want to adjust my target for that input. So again, I'm going to kind of bring this back, and I know lots of other people are going to end up talking about this, is when I deal with affordability, I always think, most of our engineers tend to think swap, size, weight, and power, or size, weight, and performance. And then cost is this thing that ends up occurring because you've done the other trades. I tend to like to go into the team and do C in front of the swap. Not my words, it's just something I've learned, which it is, I learned to set my target. So as you can see on this circle in front of you, is you have a threshold, you have the goal cost, i.e. that inner circle. I really want to get to that smaller number. And it could be the cost at a specific phase. It could actually be the entire life cycle cost. But it could be a mixture of those things. I could also have what my cost threshold is, i.e. I cannot go beyond this number. I go beyond here, I'm outside the level. So what you'll end up doing is we make those trades. You have performance, schedule, risk on each of those phases, and you take into account the requirements, the life cycle cost, the mission needs, the ILS. What is the customer doing? What is their schedule that they're trying to meet? And with that, you get a trade space. And if you're doing this in probabilistic world, you get a variation. So you get to set an optimal solution, get a best value for your customer, understand your risk, and meet that schedule. So what ends up happening is we can actually balance that graph on the top right where you sit there and say, which life cycle cost or which portion of the affordability am I most concerned with for this program? And if it's modeled well, you can look at it and you have predictions going forward. And the mission is, as I always say, the tagline here is, the mission is always to balance the customer's needs with what they can afford. And remember when we went at that first statement is, how do they want to use the system? When do they want to use the system? How are they going to store it? These are all things that we have to take into account because that is, we have to live within their budget and we have to live within what they need it to do.
I think that's your last slide. Right?
Well, Darren,
and I believe that's my last slide. So yes. I'll leave it back to you guys.
Okay. Darren, this is Bob Hunt. I want to thank you for your presentation. I think what you've done already is exactly what we were after. You have broadened the definition of affordability from a point to a probability and are really making the point that affordability is a set of trade-offs. And I do think sometimes our government client seems to think it's it's a point estimate. But your presentation this morning is very helpful, and I appreciate it. Thank you. You can put questions in the chat. Go ahead.
I think, Bob, we were about to say the same thing. We did get a question. All right. John Adams' question is, within Raytheon, where are your affordability estimates briefed, or how are they used?
That's a good question. So how are they briefed? It depends on the program. So for my job, a lot of times, so in Raytheon, we have kind of 3 sets of, I would say, cost engineers or affordability people. One of those happen to live, a lot of them, in the in our operations and support and sustainment contract world. So some of them actually will report to the customer directly and to the program managers on sustainment contracts, especially when we're talking about, A sub O's and that analysis. We have a group that is on many programs that are cost engineers that will work on the trade space with supply chain, coming up with cost estimates depending on, is it using historical data? Is it using models? And then you have, I'll give you my perspective because I'm probably a odd tool in the company. I work on the front end of the business most of my time, which means that a lot of my job is in that early gate stages when we're doing proposals. So in my world, I will brief our chief engineers, our lead system engineers, and I will work with them to define the cost targets and items like that and how we can do trade spaces. I will also have times when I'm reporting directly to the program management office of small programs. I also have many times, because I'm on the early stage, I will be sitting there briefing our chief engineers of product lines, our business areas, our vice presidents of business areas, all the way up to our presidents of our company. So depending on some of our projects, we will sit there and brief throughout the phase. So we will try and bring affordability conversation in as often as we can, because that is a thing that I think we do very well. And as far as I'm concerned, the customer, even if, I think Bob said it right, even if our customer doesn't understand that they need it, we always want to bring it to their attention. So as an example, if it's we are competing to go into a new market or to replace an existing supplier, we will often tell the customer, yes, you will have to spend money on your development of that contract, but your overall unit cost will greatly reduce, which is good. But the thing that you should be most concerned with is that your sustainment costs are going to drop down by X number of %. So sometimes that is our sales pitch that I will give to the customer. Sometimes I'll give it to the program manager so that they will give it to them. And there are sometimes that I've briefed up to a vice president a briefing about how this is a good opportunity that he will then go and talk to the customer on his side to do the sales pitch. Because honestly, our VPs are usually much better at selling than I am. Does that answer your question?
Yes, chat message says, yes, indeed it did. We've got one more question that we'll take. This one is from Bruce Riggins. Bruce, we're ready for you.
Okay, thank you. You're able to hear me?
We are indeed.
I can.
Okay, great. I happen to be the community practice lead for the Affordability Analysis group in the Military Operations Research Society. We've been exploring some of these affordability, what is it type of questions for a number of years. And so a question I wonder, I see the common circle here with cost, performance, schedule, and risk, or what we've often referred to as the stool. The three-legged stool with risk as a platform. And but what we've run into then is things like personnel or equipment, or the scheduling of equipment. I mean, schedules of my program might be one thing, but interjecting the schedule of my program on the availability of some other resource may be something else entirely. How do these other factors incorporate themselves in this concept of affordability that you've presented?
You actually hit a question. I'm now thinking back, and there's actually a program that we were working on as a kind of a study very early. So it's not Army. This was actually, I hate to say it, it's going to be one of your brothers on another branch, which was Air Force, now it's Space Force. So when you're talking about like availability of equipment, one of the biggest challenges when you talk about a satellite is I need to do vacuum chamber testing. So you want to build lots of satellites, you might run into an issue of I'm going to start running into a roadblock of there's already a satellite in my high bay vacuum chamber, so therefore I have to wait. So in an analysis, and this is what our schedulers a lot of times will do, is they actually already build predictive and probabilistic models on schedule. So we can take into account things such as, oh, I need a vac chamber. Well, Raytheon, we only have X number. Well, do we need to reach out to Boeing or Northrop? We're in Los Angeles. Boeing has vacuum chambers. So does Northrop Grumman. And we can always try and see if they have availability and see if we can lease their space. That's always an option. We can also adjust our schedule so that we know ahead of time where we need to be and what's critical. So you are right that it kind of goes to that idea that a program is not on its own. So when we think affordability, you also have to reach out to what is my space. So like for Raytheon, one of the things that they will have me do, and we do on our large programs and we do on our smaller programs, is what is the Raytheon's investment plan? So if you said you needed a lab and the lab that we wanted to use is filled, we will do a trade space analysis of what's the cost to build out a new lab, what's the cost to rent a lab space if one such exists, or can we delay that other program because this one has a greater criticality? That becomes a little bit of that personnel thing too. You gotta think about what you need when you need it. And as you kind of hinted at, defense programs are not often, hey, I know what I'm going to be doing next month. I have programs that we're doing models for that have 7 years of development. So it's very interesting. You need to know that. And what you have to make sure you do is you pull in your ops team early so that they can tell you, oh, you want this thing in 6 years. Well, I have these other programs going to be happening, so we need to do a trade-off, or we have to talk about expansion, and our leadership needs to be aware of that stuff. So the previous question was, everybody needs to know what's important. Affordability might be my most important thing, but I can tell you, like my chief engineer, they might care more about the classified mission requirements that I don't know. But so you always have to have conversations. Does that help?
Yes, somewhat. And just, I'm with Boeing. Karen and I actually work together. I guess, part of the question is that we're exploring actually is whether the availability of, let's say, personnel that have the right skill set within the period of time that we need them. It's expensive and takes time to train a skill set. So do you hire in more? Except in the military, you can't always do that. So do you move people around? Do you take them from another program? Are these all part of affordability? Because they are certainly part of management decisions in any company, and they're part of leadership decisions in military for whether they can manage a project. No matter how much money they have, they may have resources they have to obtain that they can't buy.
Bruce, that is a heck of a question, and we're going to have to trim you. We're going to connect you and Darren.
You and I can talk about it another time.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah,
Thank
maybe
you.
We'll have a conversation another time. But
Thank you.
I have some ideas with that. I think it's affordability, but it's not. It's a different. It is knowledge transfer affordability within a company.
Yeah. All right. Well, Megan, do you want to jump to the first poll question?
I do.
And you can, and for the whole audience, you can send emails and/or continue on the chat, and we'll continue the discussion. But I do want to get through the hour here with everyone having a chance to talk. Darren, thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
So if everybody would like to participate in our poll, you can open up a browser and go to pollev.com/MeganJones104, the creative name that is, and answer this multiple choice question. This will let us know a little bit about you guys. Oops. That's better. Here we go. Now, those the engineers came in fast. I imagine that's part of the job, right? Project managers sitting back, waiting to make sure everybody else does their thing. I get it. All right. Well, I'd say it looks like we have a pretty well attended audience from the engineers. Okay.
Are you showing? I don't see the results. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'd say the engineers carried the day.
All right. Well, then with that, let's move on.
Yes, our next speaker is Wendy and Justin from Northrop Grumman, and they're going to give kind of their company perspective. But let me just reaffirm that we kind of do the Chatham rules. These people are, while the presentations have all been approved, and you can talk with them, you really can't attribute direct things to them. So, Wendy, are you or Justin ready?
Yes, sir, we are. So good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all okay? Because my sound is going a little in and out, so I apologize if I get choppy throughout this presentation. My name is Wendy Rebello. I am the Senior Director of System Engineering at Northrop Grumman Defense Systems Sector, and I have Justin Knowles with me on the line also. Justin is a Senior Manager at our Aeronautics Systems Sector within the strategy world, and he and I have worked together quite a bit. In fact, with his experience in mind, we have touched, I'll say, the term of affordability in various disciplines, whether it was engineering, strategy, from a financial perspective. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, that within our careers and this perspective that we come with, as Darren was mentioning earlier, we look at affordability as a little bit more of a DNA aspect. Now, my chart here is a little bit busy, so I apologize. Let me walk you through it visually. So that way you can kind of know where your eye should go. So let's start at the very top. So what is affordability, right? Well, in a perfect world, everyone comes together, program managers, system engineers, executive, all of these folks come together and we work together to design the minimization of the lifecycle costs, as Darren mentioned earlier. However, this never really happens because, as we all know, within the space that we work on, programs, they're pretty complex, and that's from a technical perspective, schedule perspective, cost, etc. So let's peel back the onion a little bit. What is affordability? And let's think back to the picture that Darren showed earlier. When you're a consumer in the grocery store, I kind of like to use the car example. When I go to shop for a car, there are certain constraints in my head of how I'm going to purchase this car. So affordability, by just definition, it's to be affordable. Well, what does that mean? Well, you can afford it. Well, what does that mean? It's to manage to bear without serious detriment. And I kind of look at that as, when I go buy a car, I have a budget constraint and I have different mission needs. And the mission needs can go from anywhere where I want a certain infotainment system. I want a certain miles per gallon on my car. I might want a certain color. There's all these different stakeholder needs that come into play. And also, how does that actually affect my mission, which is to drive from point A to B. And if you look at it from that very simplistic perspective, budget constraints plus mission needs, now you can kind of see how affordability is, quite frankly, a very broad term. And with that broad term, you have to account for several different aspects: mission cost effectiveness, the customer's purchase price, cost containment. And these are all aspects that happen in various pieces of the life cycle, whether it's early up front in the exploration phase and your trade studies and going after new business from a proposal perspective and shaping the customer or whatnot, and all the way through development phase, your cost containment through production and cost reduction initiatives, and then of course the ONS, because we know, especially within the air domain, that's a big portion of your LCC. So all these different aspects play into affordability. And again, it's a very broad term. I'll say within our company, having worked in various disciplines, different programs, and different lifecycle phases, we use that term a lot: affordability. And you'll see everyone has a piece to the puzzle. It doesn't mean that any one person necessarily owns affordability. And so now draw your eyes down to the table here, where this is actually a spinoff from what we shared last webinar. Within Northrop, we look at these cost aspects, I'll say, from different expected skills and knowledge base across our disciplines, whether you're system engineering, software, production, business management, price estimating, and strategy, of course, because they all play an integral part in how we look at costs, and more importantly, affordability. So those are the different disciplines that we have acknowledged touch the direct piece of affordability. Now, again, we're looking at it from a DNA perspective, so everyone plays in, and it's more of a mentality. But if you were to take those disciplines and say, now, what do you do in your particular job or function that is a, I'll say, an analysis or a trade study or whatnot that touches affordability and feeds into it, now you're looking at your table headers here: LCC, trade studies, cost strategy, price to win, all these different aspects as it's matrix and tied to different disciplines. You kind of put that together, and now you can see how the term affordability, it gets quite complicated. And everyone has a piece of the puzzle, and not only from a different skill set and different discipline, but you have to work together and across the life cycle. So how we look at affordability, it really spans the entire life cycle, and it's an integrated responsibility. There is no necessarily one function or one individual that owns it. And I have seen within different areas where there is the affordability team, and these affordability teams may live, again, in different life cycle phases. Depends on very much what program structure they're in and how their customer is set up as well. And that's fine. But again, we try to make sure that even if there is a team that is designated as affordability, it really is in more of how we do business, working together, and ensuring that it gets back to that big blue in the middle. There's budget constraints, and it's meeting the mission needs. So that's, and Justin, I'm not sure if you are have often, if you want to add anything to that.
Wendy, Justin wasn't able to get in from mic check, so he'll have to save his comments for now.
Okay. So I'm standing solo, so I think that's all I have today.
All right, are there any questions, Megan?
No, sir, I have not seen a question. So what we'll do is get to the poll question.
First, let me thank Wendy. Wendy, that's great, and we're really beginning to see the different perspectives on affordability. So this next question is on the poll. Boy, there are people that are quick on the switch here.
Look at it go.
It's almost as much fun watching the poll as it is answering the question, isn't it?
Woo, okay. So that looks like that's a pretty good layout we have there. The next presentation, go ahead.
The next presentation is from Kevin Hewlett from Huntington Ingalls Industries. So Kevin, please take it away.
Okay. It's, as many of you have already seen today, and it's going to continue to become readily apparent, the concept of affordability is very strongly dependent on the context in which we are discussing it. So as just a real quick background, much of my career has been spent in proposal development. So a lot of my perspective kind of centers around that viewpoint of it. And what I've found throughout my career is that affordability as a concept actually sits at the center of a four-way tug of war between the provider, the customer, and the tangible and intangible cost benefits. All too often it's very easy just to kind of look at the tangible benefits because those are very clear and obvious, things such as your investment, your development, rate of return, et cetera. And then from the customer perspective, obviously the cost, the life cycle cost as well as the upfront acquisition cost. But the intangibles can play a very, very big role and can sneak up on you if you don't take them into account. From the provider's perspective, of course, a lot of it can be reputational, as well as capturing a market share, customer confidence. All those things can have an impact later on down the line and need to be taken into account up front. From the customer perspective, you want to take a look at your best value. There could be something that is more expensive with respect to acquisition and life cycle, but can protect you from things such as obsolescence and a better quality that will require less maintenance. Another thing also to take a look at is future needs. Even though what you are purchasing may have functionality that you don't need in the near term, it can allow you to expand later on. And so this can kind of tie back from the provider's perspective. Affordability is very closely related to risk. And Darren kind of touched on that in his presentation. Because you can take on a project, you can seek out some business that can actually increase your market share and provide later opportunities, but upfront may not seem quite as affordable as other options and other things you can go for. So you've really got to look not just at the near term, but the big picture and stretch your perspective out into the future a little bit. And then, of course, on the flip side of that is being able to take a look at your resources and schedule constraints to make sure that you can be successful. On the customer side of things, you kind of look at your utility, your present needs as well as your future needs, and balance that against the cost, either the cost in time with respect to lead time, the upfront or the life cycle cost. And it's probably a little bit of an oversimplification, but I tried to kind of pull everything down to an equation because, well, I like math. And utility minus cost would equal your value. And if your value is greater than the weighted average cost of capital or your cost of money, then you can determine that it is affordable. Now, it's very easy to say and very easy to show, but in practice can become kind of difficult. So you've got to think of ways to kind of balance that affordability equation. A thorough analysis of alternatives is always helpful from both the customer side as well as the provider. But it's also extremely helpful to have that good relationship between customer and provider. And oftentimes collaboration can find a solution that will meet both of their needs. And so just kind of in conclusion, from a perspective of proposal development, affordability can be best described as the balance of relative value between the customer and provider with respect to the tangible and intangible costs and benefits, all through the lens of capability and capacity.
Any questions for Kevin? Well, I want to thank all of our presenters, but particularly I didn't want us to become so aerospace centric. And Kevin comes from the shipbuilding industry, which is a different perspective than many of us. So, Kevin, thank you. Megan, did any questions come in?
We are going to be skipping questions for the rest of the time because we're running out of it. But I'll be happy to connect anybody who has a question to their target person.
Perfect. You want to do the next poll question?
I do indeed. What are the most important skills required for affordability analysis? That's a mouthful, affordability analysis. On this one, you guys don't have to enter your own answer. You can upvote somebody else's if that's something that works better for you. So far, we've got collaboration, critical thinking, ooh, math, value analysis. Here we go. Systems thinking, critical thinking, and analytical thinking, good data, attention to detail. Good data got up there twice. Critical thinking seems to be taking the day. No, with some subtleties between critical and analytical thinking, I'm sure worth exploring. All right. All right, Bob, you want to take us on to the next person?
Yeah, so Karen Marakas from Boeing is going to speak next. And so Karen, take that away. Thank you.
All right, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. All right. Okay, so as we've heard, affordability means different things to different people. It's a term that encompasses many different concepts or analyses or decisions. And so for me, I like to think of it as an umbrella. It's an umbrella of different concepts and activities, which all help determine strategy that then enable affordable solutions. So I've got my picture of an umbrella here, and taking that analogy one step further, let me see if I can do this, get the animation going. Okay, so the tip of the umbrella points to strategy. So affordability is feeding into strategy. But you've heard a little bit about strategy already. I'm not going to spend much time on that. Instead, I am going to talk about it from the systems engineering perspective. And for me, that is all about trade studies. So moving on, try to get to the next slide, perhaps. Okay, here we go. So if you've been in the affordability world or just in proposals and defense world, you've probably seen a chart that looks something like this. So you've got cost on one axis and performance on the other, and I've got performance in air quotes. But basically what you're doing is exploring the trade space between the performance, cost, risks, schedule, requirements, and you want to find the best value solutions. Another word for performance on this left axis could be value. And so really we're looking at value versus cost, because performance can be defined many different ways. So think of it as value versus cost. So when we are doing these trade studies, really, and unfortunately this isn't showing up on the full screen here, but really we're looking at the entire life cycle. So in theory, we want to explore the impacts of decisions from one phase and how that impacts a different phase in the life cycle. So you're doing trade-offs across the entire life cycle, and hence you need your life cycle cost models. In practice, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes trade studies may focus only on one phase. So maybe you're only in production, and there you're focusing on average unit cost. Or maybe you're really only focused on operations and support, and it might be, your cost per flight hour. Or maybe you're interested in the development and production only, and you're not really that interested in what happens after that. So sometimes the trade studies are more narrow in scope in terms of going across phases. Let me try to advance to the next slide. So in the design phase, often we are doing trade studies on the platform, and that platform could be something like an entire system. So here we've got an airplane, or it could be down to its smallest components like a bracket or a valve or a fastener. And advancing again, the production phase then, so the decisions from the design phase obviously impact the production phase. And so you may be looking at the production system layout, the operations, the tooling, or maybe you're looking at the supply chain aspect of it, where you want to look at the availability of your suppliers, logistics that are involved, the scheduling, things like that. And then lastly, we've got the O&S section, where you could be focused on repair concepts or reliability, or obsolescence, technology insertion, right? And so we've seen a lot of these things already, or we've heard about them. Darren, Kevin, Wendy, they've all talked about the different life cycle phases, the things that you may be focused on. In particular, there was a question for Darren about resources, and he was describing the vacuum chambers. And so I thought, well, you know, that's sort of like the resources and the availability of a production system. So you're hearing about all these different concepts, again, that cover all the different life cycles. But really what I want to emphasize here is that the things that I've shown under my affordability umbrella, there are many other things that could fall under this larger affordability umbrella. And if you ask others within my own company, within Boeing, what affordability means, their answers could be completely different depending on their function, their business unit, their role, just on their perspective. So what I've described here is affordability from a systems engineering perspective. And that's all that I have. So Wendy, Megan, you can take control.
All right.
Thank you, Karen. Next question.
Our next question is, what training related to affordability could ICEAA provide that you don't currently have access to? This is a write-in, another one of those write-in questions that you can upvote each other's answers. Looking forward to hearing from all of you. What about our panelists? What do you guys think? More, okay, that's helpful. As a taxonomy as opposed to taxidermy, I'm guessing. Yep, okay. Online guides, it's just come up. Value analysis. You guys don't seem to like each other's answers very much. There we go. Design to cost. Any other of those answers striking anybody's fancy? Come on, one of them's got to be good. Okay. Excellent. Bob, why don't we...
Okay. All right, John. Now, our next speaker is John Dean from Lockheed. Last but not least, John, would you kind of kick off with your company's perspective?
All right, here we go. Howdy, y'all. Hailing from Texas here. And here's a perspective on affordability from a value engineer. When I step back to think about how I would explain affordability to you, from my personal experience as a contractor, I decided it didn't make sense to define it just from my personal view only. I felt like I had to define it with a broader view representing multiple perspectives. So I attempted to describe it here with these different colored boxes. The customer perspective is depicted in the green box. Contractor perspective, like mine, is the blue box. Systems engineers, who could be on either the customer side or the contractor side, are in the yellow box. And the gray body of knowledge box helps us put affordability into perspective by listing the concepts and analysis methods we typically would encounter. So let's open up each of these boxes one at a time, starting with the green box. And I hope you can see from my snapshot here, I believe one of the common threads across all of these perspectives is the word value, depicted by the diamond here, I think you can see. And from the customer's point of view, the voice of the customer, which is pretty well documented by DAU, and I took the liberty to abbreviate it here a little bit. Affordability is the degree that the benefits realized are worth the cost, and they support customer strategic goals. It's also the conditions that exist when costs are in consonance with customer requirements. And it could also be called or referred to as the results from an analysis of the costs versus the resources available, which would be also known as the budget. And then, so a second thread to my perspectives here in the different boxes is depicted by my balded but certified gearhead value engineer who is trained to talk the language of affordability across the colored boxes. So hope you all appreciate that. And when we open up the blue box, we find that a contractor's view of affordability or value is, and that is value to the customer, in two different applications we run into primarily. Each have different objectives. One is in the context of a proposal that we kind of talked about a little bit today already. And the objective there is to offer value to the customer to secure a contract award. The other is after contract award during program execution, where the objective is to deliver value to the customer as agreed upon in the terms of the contract. So kind of two different realms we play in on the contractor side. If we go down and open up the yellow box of the systems engineers, we kind of get some confirmation from the technical community that value is again depicted by the diamond, and that's a common thread that runs across the different perspectives. But when you go talk to the systems engineers, you kind of get the story, you might get the story that the term value engineering didn't quite fit their mold. It had to be changed to the term affordability because it had to end in ility to be considered one of the real systems engineering things. And then also part of in that yellow box is the fact that the value engineering skills that you need to operate in a systems engineering environment is of course the combination of your technical skills and financial skills. And I think we kind of touched on that a little bit today already as well. If you, one other point here, if you expect affordability to really be adopted and embraced by the technical community, our balded but certified gearhead value engineer here will have to show several cases where his time and energy have resulted in real quantifiable customer value to prove and demonstrate to everybody that this is a credible thing that we should go spend our time on. So insert cultural change here, just one of the steps in the process. Not easy, but really important to kind of make that happen. And then moving over to the gray box, we dig into a third common thread that runs across our colored boxes, and that is our body of knowledge. And that gives a little bit more depth to our understanding of what affordability is, because we list the concepts and analysis methods and the best practices we encounter on our shared affordability mission. So I hope you appreciated my depiction of affordability with my 4 colored boxes, the diamond of value, my balded but certified gearhead value engineer, and I hope you have a better appreciation of perspectives on affordability. And you know, kind of in closing, I just hope we're all inspired to continue to build upon our common body of knowledge for training and certification, and to help address the knowledge management challenge that we all recognize that we have. So thank you for ICEAA for pulling us together to tackle this initiative, and I look forward to continuing along this path.
Thank you, John. We're running a couple of minutes over, but if you don't mind, we have a kind of some good closing. So if you'll hang with us a little more, as you can see, affordability really is a function of where you are and what your job is. And I think then, Megan, the next poll question really brings us to a conclusion.
Sorry, I was muted. Just about a conclusion. We've got this poll question, which is going to be a word cloud, and then we've got a few closing comments after that. So go ahead and put your words up there. Everybody, it's pollev.com/MeganJones104. It's got to be more than trade studies and FIOB. No? All right, so affordability apparently means trade studies and FEOB.
Just a quick comment. I'm having trouble getting into that polling, so other people may be too.
Yes, Karen, I'm having the same problem. I seem to have lost the link.
How about now?
Oh, it came back up. Okay.
Yes, got it now.
Yes.
Will somebody tell the person who doesn't know what FEOB means, in case there's somebody out there who didn't know what it meant? I don't want to point any fingers at anybody.
Front end of the business.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And I'm sure everybody who didn't know that is very grateful.
And you can also type in, I was going to say, you can type in the same words that you're seeing here, because if they resonate with you, the more people that type in one word, the larger the word is on the cloud.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Thank you.
DNA. Is that, you guys are also geneticists, or is there something else going on I'm not aware of? All right.
I'm not sure what DNA. Yeah.
A-OK. Another acronym is coming ASAP. All righty. Well, TCB and yeah. All right. I think that's a pretty healthy looking cloud.
But it really does tell us that value is what we're talking about, and that may be the big takeaway. Again, I don't want to rush, but we are running overtime. Megan, you want to go to the next slide? I think it's there, kind of our advertisement.
I do, and I'm happy to advertise. I will let the eyes do the reading, but the ICEAA online workshop is May 17th through 20th. If you hadn't signed up, get on the bus. It's 4 half days, so your increasingly blurred work-life balance will still be able to be struck. There's going to be 48 presentations, and unlike when we're there in person, we'll be recording these sessions so you can catch up with them. Attendees can log on for the next 6 months and watch the ones that they missed. So it is hands down, it's 48 hours of training for a deeply discounted price. So I encourage everybody to check out ICEAonline.com/online2021. And I think
next poll question. Yes.
Okay, you want to do the next poll question? One moment, please. Just takes a sec, hold on. All right, this one is, what topics would you like to explore in future OEM COG meetings and/or activities? This is another upvote other people's answers. So somebody's got to type something for everybody else to upvote it. There we go, risk analysis. You like risk analysis? We really like risk analysis. Come on, 3. Oh, product-based bidding.
Good answer. Good answer.
Ooh. Collaborating with the customer, very nice. Still, risk analysis is taking it away. All right, because we are short on time, we'll kind of cut that one a little shorter. Bob, if you want to just
let me make a couple closing comments. Next steps, we do want to build upon our body of knowledge to do a little bit more of a deep dive. We want to continue to partner with the customers to drive efficiency. But the bottom line is we're planning to have another meeting about the middle 15th of July. Topic is TBD. Based on what comes in, it could well be risk analysis. But again, don't hesitate to communicate directly with Megan or I or any of the panelists. This is supposed to be of value to the OEM community, so we want to know your opinions. Once again, thank you to all the speakers. We've run just a little bit over, but In an hour and 8 minutes, we crammed in a lot of valuable information. So thank you all. Any closing comments, Megan?
Not for me. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys, and I hope to virtually see many of you at the workshop next month.
All right. Thank you. Good evening.